A guy online decided to stop buying non-essential things for 6 months. That was it. No complicated budget, no extreme frugality challenge. He simply stopped buying things he didn't genuinely need. He expected to save some money. What he didn't expect was that his anxiety dropped. His savings account started growing faster than he thought possible. And perhaps strangest of all, he said advertisements started feeling almost invisible. The things he used to obsess over buying suddenly stopped feeling important. Now, whether that story is about him or about thousands of people who've had the exact same experience doesn't really matter, because something strange happens when you stop buying things you don't need. And I don't mean strange in a bad way. I mean strange in the way that one day you look around your house and realize the life you were trying to build with your credit card was never actually the life you wanted. Most people think spending less is about saving money. It's not. The money is just the side effect. And for people earning normal middle-class incomes, that's an important distinction, because most of us aren't gonna magically double our salary next month. The fastest financial progress often comes from becoming more intentional with the money we already have. What really changes is your relationship with desire, stress, advertising, time, and even your definition of what it means to be wealthy. And later in this video, I'm going to show you the psychological shift that makes advertisements lose much of their power over you, plus a simple 30-day experiment that could save you thousands of dollars a year without making you feel deprived. Because once you see what's really happening beneath your spending habits, you can't unsee it. Let's start with the first thing that happens, because honestly, it catches most people completely off guard. When you stop reflexively buying things, you start noticing how much of what you own was never really chosen intentionally. Look around your home for a moment. The gadget sitting in a drawer, the shirt with the tag still attached, the kitchen appliance you were convinced would change your life, the random Amazon purchase you barely remember ordering. Most of those purchases weren't made by the most thoughtful version of you. They were made by a version of you that was bored, or stressed, or tired, or influenced by a perfectly timed ad. And eventually you have this uncomfortable realization. You look at something collecting dust and think, I traded actual hours of my life for this. That's a powerful moment, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Which brings us to something most people never think about. Money is not really money. Money is time. Every dollar you've ever earned required some amount of your life to obtain. The hours, the effort, the energy, the mornings you didn't feel like getting up, the days you dealt with difficult customers, bosses, co-workers, deadlines, or responsibilities. Here's a weird way to think about it. If you earn $25 an hour after taxes, a $200 impulse purchase didn't cost you $200. It cost you 8 hours of your life, an entire work day. Suddenly the question isn't, can I afford this? The question becomes, is this worth giving up a Saturday for? And that single shift in thinking changes everything, because most unnecessary purchases don't survive that test. But the financial benefits aren't actually the most surprising part. The most surprising change is what starts happening inside your head after a few weeks. And once it happens, you'll never look at advertising the same way again. Most people walk through life as targets. Every social media feed, every website, every app, every video, someone is trying to sell you something, and they're not guessing. The world's biggest companies spend billions of dollars studying human behavior. They know how to create urgency. They know how to create desire. They know how to make a product feel like the missing piece of your life. And for most people, it works. But something strange starts happening when you intentionally delay purchases. You see something, you want it, the urge feels real, maybe even urgent, but instead of buying it immediately, you wait a day, a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then something remarkable happens. The desire starts fading. The thing that felt absolutely essential suddenly becomes forgettable. What felt urgent turns out to have been manufactured. And once you've experienced that a few times, advertisements start losing their power, not because you're stronger than everyone else, because you've seen behind the curtain. You've learned that most desires have a lifespan. If you don't feed them, they eventually disappear on their own. And that's one of the most freeing psychological discoveries a person can make. Because if desire fades naturally, you no longer have to obey every impulse you feel. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Stopping unnecessary spending doesn't just change how you spend, it changes how you define wealth. Most people think wealth means acquiring more things, a bigger house, a newer car, a nicer wardrobe, a lifestyle that looks successful from the outside. But once you step off that that treadmill, even briefly, your definition starts changing. Wealth stops being about possessions and starts being about options, freedom, flexibility, the ability to handle problems without panic, the ability to say no when you want to say no, the ability to spend your time the way you choose. That's when you realize something most people spend decades chasing. Real wealth feels a lot more like peace than it does luxury. And in a minute, we're gonna talk about one everyday habit that's quietly costing some people thousands of dollars a year without them realizing it. Let's do some uncomfortable math for a minute, because this is where good intentions collide with reality. One of the biggest financial traps people still fall into today is confusing convenience with necessity. Food delivery apps are a perfect example. What started as an occasional convenience has quietly become a routine expense for millions of people. And because the cost is spread across dozens of small purchases, most people never stop to calculate what it's actually costing them. Imagine ordering a meal that costs $12 at the restaurant. By the time you add delivery fees, service fees, taxes, and a tip, that same meal can easily cost $25 or more. Now, let's say you do that 3 times a week. That's roughly $40 in extra fees every week. Over a year, that's more than $2,000. $2,000 spent not on food, but on avoiding a short drive. Again, this isn't a judgment, it's just math, and the math is brutal. The same thing happens with subscriptions. In fact, subscriptions might be even worse because they're designed to become invisible. A streaming service, a fitness app, cloud storage, a premium membership, a meal planning app you downloaded during a burst of motivation 6 months ago. Individually, they seem harmless. $10 here, $15 there, $7 somewhere else. But collectively, they can become one of the biggest leaks in your financial life. Here's a challenge. Open your banking app this week and scroll through the last 2 months of transactions. Look for every recurring charge. Then ask yourself one simple question. If this service disappeared tomorrow, would I immediately notice? If the answer is no, cancel it. Most people can save hundreds of dollars a year with a single afternoon of cleanup. And here's the crazy part. The people who build these subscription businesses are counting on you not paying attention. Their ideal customer isn't someone who loves the service. It's someone who forgets they have it. Now, saving money is nice, but the deeper changes happen beneath the surface. Because after a few weeks of intentional spending, something starts happening that most people never expect. Your relationship with desire begins to change. At first, it's uncomfortable. You'll see something you want, a new phone, a gadget, a pair of shoes, a random item that somehow convinced you your life would be better with it. And the urge feels intense, almost physical. Most people assume that if they don't buy it, that feeling will just keep getting stronger. But that's not what happens. Desire follows a pattern. It rises, it peaks, and then it fades. The thing you couldn't stop thinking about last month becomes something you barely remember. And once you experience this enough times, you realize something important. Most purchases aren't solving a need, they're relieving a feeling. Boredom, stress, loneliness, frustration. The purchase gives temporary relief, but the underlying feeling remains, which is why the cycle repeats. And once you understand that, you stop treating every desire like an emergency. You can simply observe it, wait, and let it pass. That's a superpower in a world designed to keep you consuming. I remember realizing one day that I couldn't even remember half the things I'd bought over the previous year. I could remember trips, I could remember experiences, I could remember conversations with people I care about, but most of the purchases, gone, forgotten. Yet the money had still left my account. That realization stuck with me because it showed me how often we're chasing a feeling instead of something that creates lasting value. It's one of the reasons I've become such a believer in intentional spending, not because I think people should stop enjoying life, but because I've seen how much stress disappears when your spending starts reflecting your actual priorities. There's another change that almost nobody talks about, and it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with time. Shopping consumes far more time than most people realize. Not just buying, everything around buying. Browsing, comparing, researching, reading reviews, scrolling, watching product videos, walking through stores, filling online carts, abandoning them, coming back later. Think about how many hours disappear every month into consumption-related activities. Now imagine reclaiming even half of those hours. What would you do with them? Read more, exercise, learn a skill, spend time with family, start a side project, get outside? Here's what's interesting. When researchers study long-term happiness, the things people consistently consistently report valuing most are relationships, health, purpose, personal growth, and meaningful experiences. Very few people look back on life and say, I wish I'd spent more time comparison shopping. Yet millions of people spend years doing exactly that. And when you stop buying things you don't need, you often get something much more valuable than money. You get your attention back. Now let's talk about one of the most important distinctions in personal finance: the difference between utility and status. Almost every major purchase falls somewhere on that spectrum. Some purchases improve your life, other purchases improve your image. The challenge is learning the difference. Utility is buying a dependable vehicle that safely gets you where you need to go. Status is financing a vehicle that stretches your budget simply because it looks successful from the outside. The tricky part is that status purchases rarely present themselves honestly. They disguise themselves as practical decisions. We tell ourselves stories. We convince ourselves we need the upgraded version, the luxury trim, the larger house, the premium package, the more expensive option. But if we're honest, many of those decisions have very little to do with utility. They're often about identity, about signaling success, about proving something to other people, or proving something to ourselves. And those decisions can become incredibly expensive. Let's take a typical car payment, $700 per month. For many people, that number doesn't feel life-changing. It's just another monthly bill. But here's where it gets interesting. If that $700 were invested every month instead and earned a reasonable long-term return, it could grow into well over $1 million over the course of a working lifetime. That's what makes status spending so dangerous. It rarely feels expensive in the moment. The cost is hidden inside monthly payments, but the long-term opportunity cost can be enormous. Think about it this way: $20 a day doesn't feel life-changing. It's a coffee here, takeout there, a few impulse purchases throughout the week, but $20 a day is more than $7,000 a year. Invested consistently over decades, that can become hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the frightening thing about unnecessary spending. It's rarely one giant mistake. It's hundreds of tiny ones. And that's why so many people arrive at retirement confused. They earned good money. They worked hard. Yet somehow financial freedom never arrived. Often it's not because they didn't make enough. It's because wealth quietly leaked away through hundreds of decisions that felt small at the time. And that brings us to something even more important than investment returns: security. Because money doesn't just buy things, money buys resilience. And resilience changes everything. I once heard someone describe an emergency fund as the ability to sleep at night, not because nothing ever goes wrong, but because when something does go wrong, it doesn't instantly become a crisis. That's one of the most overlooked benefits of spending less. Most people focus on what they're giving up. Very few focus on what they're gaining. When every dollar is already committed to payments, subscriptions, and habits, life becomes fragile. A car repair feels catastrophic. A medical bill feels overwhelming. A job disruption feels terrifying. Not necessarily because the problem itself is impossible to solve, but because there's no margin for error, no buffer, no breathing room. And that's where so much financial anxiety comes from. In many ways, financial breathing room is one of the most valuable things money can buy. Not because it makes life perfect, but because it gives you margin when life doesn't go according to plan. It's not always the size of the problem, it's the lack of capacity to absorb it. But when you start redirecting money away from things you don't genuinely need, something powerful begins to happen. That buffer starts growing, slowly at first, then faster. And eventually emergencies stop feeling like life-altering disasters. They become problems, still inconvenient, still frustrating, but manageable. And the psychological effect of that change is difficult to overstate, because the goal of money isn't just accumulation, it's peace of mind, it's freedom from constant low-level panic, it's knowing that one unexpected expense won't knock your entire life off course. Now let me give you a simple example. Imagine standing in a checkout line, you pick up something you didn't plan to buy. Maybe it's $20, maybe it's $50, maybe it's $100, nothing outrageous, just one of those purchases that seems harmless. Then at the last second you put it back. For a brief moment you feel a tiny sense of deprivation, like you missed out. Most people know that feeling, but something interesting happens next. The feeling disappears, usually within seconds, and what replaces it is something much more valuable: control. You realize that you made the decision. The advertisement didn't make it, the impulse didn't make it, the habit didn't make it, you did. That feeling compounds, just like money does. Every time you repeat that process, your ability to delay gratification gets stronger. Every time you resist an impulse purchase, you're training a skill, and over time, that skill becomes automatic, until one day, advertisements that once controlled your attention barely register at all. Now, at this point, some people hear all of this and assume I'm advocating for a joyless life. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, it's the exact opposite. The goal isn't to stop spending. The goal is to stop spending unconsciously. There's a huge difference. This isn't about becoming cheap. It's not about obsessing over every dollar. It's not about refusing to enjoy your life. It's about making sure your spending reflects your actual priorities. Because here's something most people discover once they become more intentional. The things they truly value become even more enjoyable. A trip you've planned and saved for feels different than a trip charged impulsively to a credit card. A meal shared with people you care about feels different than another random food delivery order. A purchase you've carefully considered feels different than one made out of boredom. Delayed gratification isn't punishment, it's anticipation, it's intentionality, it's creating experiences that actually matter. The strange thing is that spending less often leads to enjoying more, not because you have less, because you appreciate more. So if you're watching this and you want to experience what we've been talking about, here's a simple challenge. Pick one category, just one. Don't try to overhaul your entire life overnight. Don't try to become a different person by Monday. Just choose one category of spending that feels automatic. Food delivery, online shopping, subscriptions, impulse purchases, whatever it is, and eliminate it for the next 30 days. Not forever, just 30 days. Then pay attention, not only to your bank account, pay attention to what happens in your mind. Notice how often the urge appears. Notice how long it lasts. Notice whether you actually miss the thing you thought you couldn't live without. Notice how much mental space starts opening up, because that's where the real transformation happens. And here's the thing nobody tells you in most personal finance books. The biggest reward isn't the money. The money matters. Of course it does. Invested consistently over decades, even small amounts can grow into life-changing sums. But the money isn't the biggest reward. The biggest reward is clarity. It's realizing that many of the things you've been chasing were never actually the things you wanted. Most people eventually discover that their deepest sources of happiness have very little to do with consumption. It's relationships, health, purpose, experiences, growth, meaningful work, peace of mind. None of those things ship to your front door. None of them arrive in an Amazon box. None of them require a monthly subscription. The version of life you've been financing may not be the version of life you truly want, and sometimes the only way to discover that is to stop buying long enough to hear yourself think. So what actually happens when you stop buying things you don't need? Your bank account grows, your anxiety decreases, your relationship with desire changes, your time opens up, advertising loses much of its power over you, your definition of wealth evolves. And perhaps most importantly, you begin seeing the difference between what genuinely matters and what was simply consuming your attention. The strange thing is that almost nobody notices these changes happening in real time. You don't wake up one morning transformed. You simply look back 6 months later and realize something is different. You're calmer, less reactive, less stressed, more intentional, more in control. The purchases matter less. The things that actually matter begin to matter more. And that's when you realize that spending less was never really about money. It was about freedom, because financial freedom doesn't always start with earning more. Sometimes it starts by becoming more intentional with the money you already have. Before you leave, I want you to do something. Think about the category of spending that feels the most automatic in your life right now. Maybe it's food delivery, maybe it's Amazon purchases, maybe it's subscriptions, maybe it's something else entirely. Drop it in the comments and commit to cutting it out for the next 30 days. Not forever, just 30 days. I genuinely like to see what category shows up the most. And if you're interested in building wealth without feeling like you're constantly sacrificing the things you enjoy, subscribe. That's exactly what this channel is about. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.